The planet was burning. Smoke rose from the broken buildings. Ash fell like snow. It was the last day of the battle, and the soldiers were leaving. But one human, a young man named Jake, was still searching. He walked through the rubble slowly, flashlight in one hand, blaster in the other. He heard a soft sound, like a whimper, behind a half-broken wall. He saw movement. He stepped closer, carefully. Then he saw her, a small alien girl, no older than 6, curled up in a tight ball. Shaking, her skin was pale blue, her silver hair tangled with dirt. She looked up with wide, glowing violet eyes, filled with fear and tears. Jake lowered his weapon slowly. "It's okay," he said gently. "I'm not going to hurt you." The girl didn't answer, just stared at him. Frozen like stone, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small protein bar. "Are you hungry?" he asked, offering it to her. Her eyes flicked to the food, then back to him. After a moment, she took it with shaky hands. She bit into it like she hadn't eaten in days. Jake noticed how thin she was, her ribs showing under her torn clothes. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around her. "You're safe now," he whispered. "I've got you." She didn't speak, but her eyes started to relax a little. Jake sat beside her, letting her eat slowly. "I'm Jake," he said. "What's your name?" The girl didn't reply, but looked at him like she wanted to trust him. After a long silence, Jake tried to make her smile. "You know," he said with a small laugh, "when you grow up, I'll marry you. How about that?" He smiled, expecting nothing, but the little girl blinked, then nodded. Her tiny hand reached out and held his jacket tighter. She believed him. Jake's smile faded a little. Surprised by her seriousness, he didn't mean it. It was just a joke to make her feel better, but something in her eyes told him. She was holding on to it. Hours later, the rescue teams arrived. They took the girl to a medical ship. Jake had to leave with his unit. War was over. His mission complete, he watched the ship fly away with her inside. He never even learned her name, but she remembered his. She whispered it in her sleep, over and over. "Jake. Jake." Years passed. Jake returned to Earth. He tried to forget the war. He worked in a spaceport, a quiet life with no battles, no missions. But sometimes, late at night, he dreamed of violet eyes and a soft voice. He had no idea that across the stars, a girl was growing up. She trained every day, studied languages, learned about humans. Not for war, not for duty, but for him, the little girl who once ate scraps in fear. Now trained with blades, spoke fluent Earth speech, and walked like a queen, and one thought never left her heart. He said he would marry me. And she believed. Every year, she looked up at the stars. Every year, she asked the same question. "When can I see Jake again?" And now, that day was near. She had grown up, and she had not forgotten. The joke Jake had forgotten had become her purpose. Zara sat under the tall, glowing tree. Her legs crossed, her mind lost in memory. She could still feel the warmth of that human's jacket around her tiny body. Years had passed, yet the memory of Jake's arms wrapping her in safety still burned bright in her heart. Most children forgot such things, but not Zara. She was no longer the trembling little girl who cried behind the rubble. She had grown not just in height, but in spirit. The elders of the care unit said she was too quiet, too focused, too driven. But Zara knew why. She had a promise to fulfill. He said he'd marry me. She whispered often, sometimes to the stars, sometimes to herself. Others laughed when they heard her say it. They said it was a joke, that humans didn't mean things like that. But Zara didn't care, because to her, Jake's words were real. At night, while the others played, Zara studied. She read Earth books, learned their languages, studied their culture. She trained her body and her mind. If she wanted to see him again, she had to be strong. She didn't want to meet Jake as a scared little girl. She wanted to meet him as someone he could be proud of. She kept a picture of Earth above her bed, and under it, written in shaky handwriting, were the words, "Wait for me, Jake, one day," during advanced training. Her mentor asked her a question. "Why do you push yourself harder than the others?" Zara simply replied, "Because someone once saved me, and I must return the favor." The mentor said nothing more, but from that day she was given special access. She learned faster than anyone in her class. She could pilot ships, speak 5 languages, and survive harsh climates. But no matter how high she climbed, she remained humble because, in her heart, she was still that girl beneath the jacket. One day, during a mission simulation, her team was ambushed. Most panicked, but Zara stayed calm. She used tactics she had read in old Earth's military files. She led her team to safety, saving 3 lives. Her superiors were shocked. They gave her a medal, but she didn't smile. She only thought, would Jake have done the same? Zara's fame spread across her sector. Ambassadors requested her presence. Leaders began to whisper her name, but she ignored them. All her focus was elsewhere. Then, the news came: a rare peace summit would be held between Earth and the Galactic Union. And Zara was selected as one of the official envoys. It was her chance, the night before departure. She stood alone on the balcony. Her silver hair danced in the wind. The stars looked so close, yet so far. "Jake," she whispered, "I'm coming." In her room, she packed only what she needed: combat robes, translator chip, and one old photo of Earth. She touched it gently, her fingers tracing the continent where she believed Jake lived. She didn't know if he'd remember her. She didn't know if he'd kept that promise. But she remembered it every day, not as a child's fantasy, but as a vow written into her very soul. And if he didn't remember, she would remind him. Zara boarded the envoy ship the next morning. The engines hummed beneath her feet. She stood at the front, eyes locked on the stars ahead. She felt no fear, no doubt. She had prepared for this moment her whole life. As the ship moved into hyperspeed, she closed her eyes. Images of Jake's smile filled her mind, his warm voice, his protective arms. He had changed her life with a single sentence. Now she would change his. Jake leaned back in his chair at the small spaceport bar. He stared at his drink, swirling it slowly. The room buzzed with voices, pilots talking, traders shouting, background music playing. But Jake wasn't listening. His mind was somewhere far away, in the past, in a place filled with smoke and fire. He sighed, rubbed his face, and tried to shake off the memory again. The war had ended over a decade ago, but some memories stayed longer than wounds. He remembered planets burning, comrades falling, and the silence that followed the chaos. But there was one moment, one face that always flickered at the edge of his mind. A little alien girl with wide violet eyes and tangled silver hair. He could barely recall her name. Wait, did she even tell him her name? All he remembered clearly was that one moment she had been so small, so scared, hiding under rubble. He had joked, just a harmless thing to make her smile. "Don't worry, when you grow up, I'll marry you," he chuckled now, shaking his head. "What a dumb thing to say," he muttered. He never thought about it seriously. He was just trying to calm her down, give her hope. He thought she'd forget it the next day. He sure did, or at least he tried. Jake had left the military soon after the war. Too much blood, too much loss. He moved to a quiet corner of Earth and took a job as a civilian engineer at the spaceport, fixing cargo ships, helping travelers, and keeping his head low. It was a peaceful life, but sometimes peace felt heavy. At night, he'd dream strange things of silver trees and glowing eyes. He'd wake up sweating, his heart pounding. He never told anyone about the girl. It felt wrong to talk about, like something sacred he wasn't supposed to explain. He never married, never even dated seriously. When asked, he'd shrug and say, just not the right time. But deep down, he didn't know what he was waiting for. It wasn't like she was coming back. She probably grew up and forgot all about that war. Forgot all about him. Still, sometimes he found himself staring up at the stars, and sometimes he whispered a name he didn't even know, like part of his heart had stayed behind on that broken planet. One evening, Jake was repairing a damaged cargo hauler. The owner, an old trader, leaned against the wall and asked, "You ever think about going off-world again?" Jake shook his head. "Nah, I've seen enough." "You look like someone waiting for something," the trader said. Jake paused, a wrench in his hand. "Maybe I am," he admitted quietly. That night, the spaceport announced something rare. Visit from a royal alien envoy. The Galactic Union had sent one of their most respected diplomats to meet with Earth's leaders. Everyone was excited. News crews gathered. And the spaceport buzzed with activity. Jake didn't care. He had seen too many aliens, too many politicians. He stayed in his workshop, covered in oil and dust. But then, he saw her. He was walking toward the supply bay when the crowd parted. Out stepped a tall, graceful alien woman dressed in elegant robes. Her hair was long and silver, her skin a soft shade of blue. And her eyes, those same violet eyes, locked onto his. Jake froze. His heart skipped a beat. He didn't know why, but something deep inside him stirred. The woman walked toward him with calm, confident steps. People whispered around them. Guards stepped aside. She stopped in front of him, looked up into his eyes, and smiled softly. "Jake," she said, her voice steady, clear, and filled with warmth. "You kept your promise." Jake's mouth opened, but no words came out. She reached into her robe and pulled out a small, worn photo of Earth. On the back, written in shaky lines, were the words, "Wait for me, Jake." And suddenly, he remembered everything. Jake stood frozen, his hands still dirty from engine grease. The elegant alien woman stood in front of him, calm and smiling. She was taller than he remembered, older, stronger, glowing with confidence. But her eyes, those violet eyes, hadn't changed. They still held that same soft light from years ago. He opened his mouth, tried to speak, but no words came. Was this real? Was she really the little girl he'd once wrapped in his jacket? "You remember me," she said gently, her voice smooth like flowing water. Jake blinked, slowly nodding. "Yeah," he said finally, his voice dry. You were the kid under the rubble." She smiled. "My name is Zara," she said, "and you are still Jake, the human who said he would marry me." People nearby turned to stare. Whispers filled the air. Jake coughed and scratched the back of his neck. "That was a joke," he said awkwardly. "You were a scared little girl. I was just trying to cheer you up." Zara tilted her head. "Yes, but your words were a promise to me," she said. "Not angry, not upset, just certain. Your kindness gave me strength, gave me hope, made me believe I mattered." Jake didn't know what to say. He looked at Horelli. Looked. The little girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who had grown with purpose. And that purpose was him. "Why now?" he asked softly. Zara's eyes sparkled. "I waited until I was old enough, strong enough, to stand beside you," she said. "You saved me once. Now I've come to find you." Jake stared down at the dusty ground. He felt emotions he hadn't felt in years. Warmth, guilt, confusion. She remembered everything, and he had forgotten. Guards started stepping closer, unsure what to do. Zara turned to them and raised a graceful hand. "He is not a threat," she said firmly. "He is my chosen one." The guards froze, confused, but obeyed her command. Jake looked around at the growing crowd. "I think we need to talk somewhere private," he muttered. Zara nodded. "Yes, I'd like that." They walked through the back corridors of the spaceport. Away from cameras and curious eyes, Jake led her to the small workroom, where he spent most of his days. It was messy, with old tools, spare ship parts, and half-finished blueprints. Zara looked around with curiosity, touching things gently. "So this is where you've been all these years," she said, almost to herself. "Yeah," Jake said. "Sitting on a bench, not very royal, huh?" She sat across from him, folding her hands in her lap. "I didn't come for luxury," she said softly. "I came for you." Jake rubbed his face with both hands. "Zara, I didn't mean to mislead you," he said. "Back then, I didn't know what I was saying." Zara nodded, understanding. "I know," she said. "But you must understand something too. On my world, words carry weight. A promise made, even in kindness, becomes a thread of fate." Jake looked at her again. "So, what now?" He asked, voice quiet. Zara smiled gently. "I'm not here to force you into anything." She said, "I came to fulfill my part of the bond, but only if your heart still has room for me." He was quiet for a long time. Then he looked into her eyes and asked, "Why me? After all these years, after everything, why not move on?" Zara reached into her robe again and pulled out something small as old jacket. Patched and cleaned. "I held this every night when I felt scared," she said, "because the human who gave it to me saw value in me when no one else did. You didn't just save my life, Jake, you gave me a future." Jake reached out slowly, his fingers brushing the fabric. His heart ached. He had forgotten a moment that became her everything. And now she had come all this way, just to return the promise. He stood up slowly, walking to the small window in the workshop. Outside, the stars sparkled in the dark sky. He took a deep breath. "Maybe," he said quietly, "maybe I need to. Remember who I used to be?" Zara walked over beside him, her voice a whisper, "And maybe I'm here to help you do that." The next morning, the sun had barely risen when a formal message arrived at the spaceport office. It was addressed to Jake, sealed with the symbol of the Galactic Union. He opened it with shaking hands and read the contents slowly. His heart sank as he read the words, "You are formally summoned to stand before the High Council of Verelian Accord, regarding your life promise made to diplomat Zara Villani during her youth." Jake stared at the message for a long time. Life promise. Was that what they called it? To him, it had been a joke. A few kind words to calm a child, but to them, it was law. Zara entered quietly, already dressed in ceremonial clothing, blue robes lined with silver thread. Her hair was braided with small glowing stones. She looked every bit the royal she had become. She noticed the letter in his hand and nodded. "They have called you," she said gently. "I knew they would." Jake looked up at her. "Zara, what exactly does this mean?" She stepped closer, her face calm but serious. "In my culture, words spoken with kindness are sacred," she said. "A promise to protect, a vow to stay, or even an offer of union, those things are not taken lightly." Jake frowned. "But I didn't know your customs. I didn't mean to bind myself to anything." Zara looked down for a moment, then back at him. "I know you didn't," she said. "And I told the council that, but there are elders who believe you must still answer before our people." Jake sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "So what? They're going to put me on trial." "Not a trial," she said. "A judgment." Later that day, a sleek silver transport arrived and took them high into orbit. They entered a grand ship shaped like a floating cathedral with shining towers and wide halls. Jake had never felt so out of place. Everything was glowing, clean and quiet. Alien diplomats, warriors, and elders stood in silence as Zara led him through the halls. At the center of the ship was a circular chamber filled with blue light. 12 high-ranking members of the Verelian Accord sat in raised chairs, their eyes cold and curious. They studied Jake like a puzzle, and he could feel the weight of their judgment. "Human male, state your full name," one of them said in a deep voice. "Jake Morrison," he answered, his voice echoing slightly. "You are accused of making a sacred promise to a child of our people," said another. "Do you deny this?" Jake hesitated. I said something," he admitted, "but I didn't know it would be seen as a promise." A murmur ran through the chamber. Zara stepped forward. "Council members," she said clearly, "Jake is not from our world. He didn't grow up with our customs or laws. To him, it was kindness, not a vow." "But you have not broken the bond," said an elder. "You've returned to him." Expecting its fulfillment, Zara nodded. "I did," she said. "Because even if he didn't remember the promise, he was still the one who gave me hope." Jake looked up at the council. "I never meant to hurt anyone," he said. "I just saw a scared little girl and wanted to make her smile. I never expected this." Another elder spoke. "But you now know the weight of your words." Jake nodded slowly. "Yes." He said, "I know now." The room fell into silence. Then the oldest of the council leaned forward. "Then the choice must be yours," he said. "You may walk away. Break the bond and return to Earth, never to meet again, or you may honor it, stand beside Zara, and accept her as your chosen partner in the eyes of our people." Jake looked at Zara. She was silent, her expression calm, but her eyes trembled slightly. She would not beg, she would not ask. This had to be his decision. Jake took a long breath. He thought of the war, the girl behind the rubble, the years he spent wondering what was missing. He thought of how she found him, how she believed in him, waited for him, and how no one on earth had ever looked at him the way she did. He turned to the council. "I'm not perfect," he said slowly. "I didn't know what I said meant so much, but if it gave her the strength to become who she is now, then I won't walk away." Zara's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't move. She just whispered, "Then let the stars witness this moment." Jake didn't sleep that night. He sat alone in the quiet guest chamber of the Varelian council ship. Stars drifted outside the wide glass window like glowing dust. He had made his choice to honor a promise he once forgot, but now, that choice led him into something even more serious, the trial of fire and truth. Zara had warned him gently. "If you accept the bond, our laws say you must be tested," she had said. "Not with weapons, but with spirit, pain, and truth." Jake had nodded, pretending to understand, but now, as he stared into the stars, he wondered what he had just agreed to. The next morning, they led him through a long corridor made of shimmering light. Zara walked beside him, wearing no armor, no weapons, only a thin ceremonial robe. Her face was calm, but her hands trembled slightly. "You don't have to do this alone," she whispered. Jake looked at her and smiled weakly. "Good," he said, "because I have no idea what I'm doing." At the end of the hall was a circular chamber filled with ancient carvings and glowing crystals. 12 elders stood in a circle, and at the center, a swirling column of white mist. One of the elders raised his hand and said, "Begin." Zara stepped forward first. She placed both hands into the mist and closed her eyes. A faint hum filled the air and images began to form inside the fog. Memories, thoughts, fears. Jake saw flashes of a broken world. Zara as a child crying in the dark, her clutching his old jacket in a cold metal room. Her training, bleeding, growing stronger, always whispering his name to herself. Jake swallowed hard. The images vanished as Zara stepped back, her breath steady, but her eyes moist. Now it was his turn. He stepped into the mist. Feeling cold air rush against his skin, it crept into his lungs like ice. Then came the voice, not spoken aloud, but inside his head, "Show us the truth of your heart." He didn't know how, but suddenly his own memories began to play like a dream. The war, the burning cities, his trembling hands holding a rifle, and then her, a tiny girl under rubble, eyes wide with fear. Him, kneeling, smiling, handing her food and warmth, saying those foolish words. "When you grow up, I'll marry you." Jake winced. The mist shifted. Now it showed his years on Earth quiet. Lonely, lost, working with machines, avoiding people. Staring at stars and feeling empty. Then came the moment he saw her again, Zara. Walking through the crowd like a dream returned. A deep warmth rose in Jake's chest. The mist pulsed. "Do you love her?" The voice asked. Jake didn't answer with words. He stepped out of the mist, walked to Zara, and held her hand. "I think I've loved her since the moment I saw her again," he whispered. Maybe even before. The council remained silent, watching, judging. Then one of the elders stepped forward. "You have passed the truth," he said. "But one test remains." Zara's eyes narrowed. "No," she said suddenly. "Not this part. He is not a warrior." Jake frowned. "What is it?" he asked. "The trial of fire." An elder replied. "You must face danger not to prove strength, but devotion, without warning." The floor beneath Jake vanished. He fell into a pit filled with flames, not real ones, but a simulated pain field. His body screamed, nerves lit up with fire. He dropped to his knees. Gasping, sweating, Zara rushed forward. "You've gone too far," she shouted. "This is barbaric." The elders didn't stop her. She jumped into the pit beside Jake, her arms wrapping around him. The pain shifted, split between them. "I won't let you suffer alone," she whispered, teeth clenched. Jake looked at her through tears. "You didn't have to come in," she smiled despite the pain. "You didn't have to keep your promise either." Together, they endured the flames until the field shut off. They collapsed on the floor, breathing hard, hearts racing, hands still. Holding, one of the eldest stepped forward again. "Pain shared is love proven," he said. "The bond is true." Jake sat quietly in the healing chamber. Soft light wrapped around his body like a warm blanket. Machines hummed gently, soothing his aches. Zara sat beside him, holding his hand, her eyes never leaving his face. Neither of them spoke, but their silence was full of things no words could explain. They had passed the trials. They had faced the truth, the pain, and the judgment. Together, Jake turned to Zara, his voice barely above a whisper. "So, what now?" Zara smiled softly. "Now, we finish the promise," she said, later that day. The grand hall of the Varelian Accord was lit with golden beams. Dozens of alien diplomats and honored guests filled the room. There was no music, no dancing, just a sacred silence and a glowing path that led to the center. Zara walked down that path in a flowing robe of silver and deep violet. Jake followed her, dressed in ceremonial robes stitched with stars. As they stood in the center, an elder stepped forward with an orb in his hands. He raised it high, and a soft light bathed them both. "Before us stand two souls," the elder said, "one who made a promise with kindness, and one who turned that kindness into strength. Today, their hearts speak not with force, but with truth." Zara reached for Jake's hand. Her voice was calm, but her eyes glowed with emotion. "Jake," she said, "you gave me hope when I had nothing. You gave me a reason to live, a future to walk toward. You were the light in my darkest hour." Jake swallowed, trying to find his voice. "Zara," he said, "I didn't know what my words meant to you back then, but now I do. You've become someone strong, someone brave, and someone I can believe in. I want to walk beside you, not because of a promise, but because I choose you." The orb flashed with bright light, and the crowd bowed their heads. The bond was sealed not just by culture or tradition, but by truth, Jake and Zara were now bound. Not by accident, but by heart. After the ceremony, the two stood on the balcony of the ship. Looking out into space, stars shimmered across the black sky like diamonds. Jake leaned on the railing and let out a long breath. "Never thought I'd end up here," he said with a small laugh. Zara stood beside him, her silver hair glowing in the starlight. "Do you regret it?" she asked gently. He shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "I think I was waiting for something to give my life meaning. I just didn't know it would come back to me years later in the form of a royal alien woman." She smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. "I waited a long time," she whispered. Jake looked at her, then wrapped his arm around her. "You won't have to wait anymore," he said. "Soon." Word of their union spread across systems. Some were shocked, others inspired. Humans and aliens alike whispered about the human who kept a forgotten promise and won the heart of a diplomat, and how the little girl who once hid behind rubble became a leader and found her chosen one. Jake and Zara began working together, building new bridges between Earth and the Varelian people. He spoke to humans about honor, about seeing aliens not as strange, but as equals. She spoke to her own people about trust, about how a single act of kindness can echo across the stars. One day, while walking through a garden on Earth, a child ran up to them and pointed. "Are you the alien princess?" The girl asked Zara. Zara knelt down, smiling. "No," she said gently. "I'm just someone who followed her heart." Then the girl turned to Jake. "And are you the human hero?" Jake laughed. "No, kid," he said. "I just kept my word." As the child ran off, Zara looked at him with warmth in her eyes. "You don't see it, do you?" "See what?" "You didn't just keep your word," she said. "You changed my world." Jake smiled, pulling her close. "Maybe," he whispered, "but you changed mine first." The stars above them blinked softly, like they were watching. Like they had been waiting for this moment just as long as Zara had. And in that quiet peace, two souls, one human, one alien, stood together. Not because they had to, but because love had made it so.